Hello, everyone. Welcome to our final week in the energy systems course. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. I apologize for having to reschedule this for when you guys watch the replay. If you have questions, definitely feel free to, message, drop them in the Telegram group, all the ways. So my intention this week is to basically try to bring everything into a nice, pretty bow. And we're going to do that to the best of our ability. The reason I have some hesitation is there's just so much information and so many different rabbit holes to go down. We could spend another 9 weeks just on the things we're going to cover today. So we might do that in the future. But just to kind of start us off, if you don't have pen and paper with you right now, go ahead, pause the video, go grab that. I just want to start with a very simple writing activity to just allow you to drop in and notice, some of the things as far as invitations that we'll cover today. So when you have that pen and paper, go ahead and you can write out the question. I would definitely recommend that. You don't have to do non-dominant handwriting unless you really want to. But basically, we're gonna just take a couple minutes and write, what do you know or what have you experienced in relationship to yourself that you were not aware of when this course started? And I know that that could be a 20-minute writing exercise in and of itself. So feel free to absolutely, take your time with this last video, pause as you want. Because I am going to ask you guys to kind of go back and look at this writing. I'm jumping ahead of myself. We'll come back here. Next questions. How does this change how you view yourself? So the knowledge that you have become aware of, how has this changed how you view yourself? How has this changed how you view your body? How does this knowledge change how you view other people? And how does this knowledge change how you view the world? Again, go ahead and pause the video, take as much time as you want to write. Since we are recording, I'm going to keep going. So just invite you to take as much time as you would like to, yeah, automatic write, unconscious write, just put onto paper the awarenesses and really just letting yourself be in what you have learned and how that has changed you over the last now 9 weeks. A lot of what I've spoken on is, on a subtle level, we can change all the things, right, in our environment and in our life, but unless we allow those experiences to change us, nothing really changes. So those final questions are really that invitation to allow yourself to uh, become aware of, if not already, and really sit with in this moment how you've changed. If you recall from our very first video, we talked about looking at the disorder as a response rather than looking at the disorder as a disorder. When we remove the label of the diagnosis and begin to get curious about what we're experiencing within our own life, we're going to have very, very different paths available to us than if we did not. If one really embodies the notion that healing is always available, meaning even the expression of the symptom is part of the healing journey, what is one being invited to witness and partake in that a Western diagnosis and possible medication has removed the invitation to partake in? Take a moment. I'm going to read this one again. If you want to pause the video here as well to really let this one sit in and digest, please do. If one truly embodies that healing is always available, meaning even the expression of the symptom is part of the healing journey, what is one being invited to witness and partake in that a Western diagnosis and possible medication has removed the invitation to participate in? There's so many different ways to take this question in, which is what I love about it. It can literally be on a physical level, right? That the expression of the symptom is part of the invitation to see, right? Externally cause and effect. But maybe even that symptom, right, is a deeper invitation. Maybe it's not just, changing the way you eat or changing a belief system. Maybe it's literally unlearning how you have learned to do something and freeing yourself entirely. Maybe the healing journey is not just the expression that we are seeing from the body, but the healing journey that one takes in reclaiming and remembering who they are as divine life force energy and spirit. I want to highlight this aspect because again, we touched briefly on the DSM-3 at the very beginning, and just something very interesting to consider. The DSM-1, when it was created in 1952, had 102 categories, diagnoses. Um, I didn't speak about this, but the first DSM was really created for military use, meaning how do we accurately, what's the word I'm looking for? Determine quality of fit for those who are able to serve and not in military. And here we are now, the DSM-5 was published in 2013. Obviously, we're a few years over that, but we are still using the DSM-5. And there are over 300 diagnoses and disorders. I want to invite this pause for a moment because I took this directly from Google, and the first thing that caught my eye was the wording, right? If someone just looked at this really quickly, they'd be like, oh yeah, category, diagnosis, disorder, it's all the same. They are not all the same. They all mean very, very, very different things. And I want to highlight those in these next slides because this is the importance of language. We think words mean one thing, but the legal system has an entirely different meaning for those words. The medical system has an entirely different meaning for those words. And so it's easy to clump those three words together and say they're the same thing, but they're definitely not. I did not add the word category to this. I will find that and add that later. Let me make a note to myself. All of the definitions that we're going to go over on the next page are from Black's Law Dictionary. It's the 6th edition. When you dive into legal language, just because the definition of a word has been updated doesn't mean that the origin of the definition has changed. So what I mean by that is you could go into Black's Law Edition 1 and look up the word diagnosis if it's there, and it may mean something entirely different than the 6th edition. With that being said, that doesn't mean that this first edition means that it doesn't count anymore. It doesn't mean that this new definition in the 6th edition has replaced it. They all still count, which is why our words and intentions have to be incredibly precise. So diagnosis, and this is where I go back to that invitation piece, right? What has the West, I'm actually going to go back to it. What is the Western diagnosis and possible medication or treatment remove the invitation to participate in? Right. One of the things I just spoke to was, seeing ourselves as living, breathing life force energy, but it gets pretty deep when you go down the rabbit hole. I'm just going to cover these quickly because there's like 6 slides and I could spend a whole hour just talking on these things and I won't. But diagnosis, according to Black's Law 6th edition, is a medical term meaning the discovery of the source of a patient's illness or the determination of the nature of his disease from a study of its symptoms. I've said this in many videos. Do not make an assumption that you know what a word means. Etymology is wonderful. Black's Law Dictionary, also wonderful, because again, the words that we're taught are not necessarily what we're taught that they mean, generally speaking, are not necessarily what they mean specifically speaking. So there's a couple more pieces to it. A clinical diagnosis is one made from a study of the symptoms only. A physical diagnosis is one made by means of physical measures such as palpation and inspection. I highlighted that word disease. Disease, deviation from the healthy or normal condition of any of the functions or tissues of the body, an alteration in the state of the body or of some of its organs, interrupting or disturbing the performance of the vital organs and causing or threatening pain and weakness. Illness, sickness, disorder, uh, bodily infirmity. consider when you take this definition, right? Take that and put it back into here. When you start to substitute words with their actual meaning, it becomes amazing what you start to see. I believe the next slide is disorder. Yeah. So we have disorder here at the bottom. Even just right, that deviation from the healthy or normal condition. If the symptom is a normal expression or an appropriate expression based on what the body is experiencing, is it a disorder? This I found very interesting. This is the actual definition of disorder in Black's Law Dictionary. Turbulent or right, righteous behavior, immoral or indecent conduct, the breach of the public decorum and morality. So you can look up some other words. I would highly, highly invite those who are watching to explore the work of Robert Whitaker. Madinamerica.com, I believe, is his website, but he does have two books, Mad in America and Anatomy of an Epidemic, excuse me. And what he really speaks to is with the amount of available mental health treatment, shouldn't we see more people living very prosperous lives? We have the most medication available. We have the most therapies available. We have the most therapists available than ever before. And yet we have the most number of people on disability. And that is a actual, you can see those numbers increasing, even including children, 0 to 5. So take your time reading those books if you do begin to explore those who are really ready to receive a very different lens. Highly, highly invite you to explore his work. I wanted to come to this word disability as well because in my career, I've filled out a number of documents that say, oh, we don't need the disorder or the diagnosis. We just need to know if this person has a disability. The want of legal capacity to perform an act term is generally used to indicate an incapacity for the full enjoyment of ordinary legal rights. Thus, persons under age, insane persons, and convicts are said to be under legal disability. There's a lot of pieces, even in the persons under age, and even what the word insane means, which is why I highlighted it. There are some other subsections that I did not include in this in regards to workers' compensation and things of that nature, but basically comes back to an incapacity for someone to enjoy, ordinary legal rights. And the way that certain words are defined are very interesting. Insane. The term is a social and legal term rather than a medical one and indicates a condition which renders the affected person unfit to enjoy liberty of action. It says here because of the unreliability of his behavior, which can include danger to himself and others. This is a very broad definition. And again, I know we can look at it and say, oh, someone who is, danger to self or others, 5150, 5250. Yes. And again, when you start to really go into the language of what these things mean, I want to go back to that bigger invitation. What have we been told in the West is a disorder or a disability or a diagnosis? And the medical professional says, oh, just take this or do this. What does this mean legally? Right? There's a whole nother subsection to explore. So outside of those energy systems and metabolic systems, those are important, yes, because when we go to make changes, it's very significant that we work with the underlying principles that run our physiology. And when we really start to take full agency of ourselves, words have meaning. Words have very, very significant meaning. So if you guys have any questions about any of those pieces, feel free to reach out and let me know. I've been doing legalese language trust studies for probably the last 3 or 4 years, and it's very fascinating to see what we have been taught as a social construct the medical and mental health system is. But when you really dive into the legal language of it, it's a very, very different ballgame. To go back to review, though, from what we've learned from weeks 1 through 8, right? If we were then to see the expression of our symptoms as a response of the body to what it is taking in and experiencing, what a deep invitation to begin to change how we look at our experience in life. One of the things I've mentioned before, and some of this is in the Google Drive, right? But when we can really look at that symptom not as a effect of the diagnosis, meaning the diagnosis is the cause and the symptom is the effect, but we can see that symptom as an expression of something. And we learn the cellular pieces, right? And then we begin to see the invitation to view the animate life force energy that exists in that cellular representation, right? And then we see that expression literally in nature all around us. What do we allow ourselves to start to unlearn or question or research and investigate so that as we we learn more, honestly, we humble ourselves in recognizing like we don't know anything. It's a very, very interesting awareness. And I'm not saying that from the lens of uh stupidity or ignorance and anything like that, but there's so much magic in our existence, and we have been taught to nullify all that, and the way we have been taught to look at things is very, very limiting. So just to summarize what we've gone over these last 8 weeks, we've learned about the paradox of the stress response cycle, right? So SAM and HPA, SAM is going to be adrenaline, HPA is going to be cortisol. They can go together. SAM will always be with HPA, but HPA does not need to be with SAM, meaning our body can absolutely have experiences in the environment and in genetic expression as well, where cortisol is going to be low grade and rampant, right? Which is going to cause increased oxidative stress, increased inflammation. We've learned about ATP, our truest energetic currency. We've learned about how that's made. We've learned about cortisol and the connection to ATP. We've talked about numerous inputs like light and food and thoughts and emotions and how they play a role in supporting or reducing the available energy we have. Again, the brain weighs 2 to 3% of the body's full weight, but it takes 20 to 30% of the body's available energy. It's amazing. We've also learned frameworks that help support viewing the body through an energetic lens. So a lot of what we talked about 2 weeks ago, as far as frequency and heart cohesion and things of that nature, chakras, nadis, we have these frameworks again that let us see the body itself as alive and knowledgeable. We even see that mirror with the earth of, oh, the earth is also alive and knowledgeable. Right? If you go into the Google Drive, we touched briefly on some of the Kabbalion pieces, but I would highly recommend reading that as well. It sets an entirely different um experience for tying these layers in together. I'm going to pause this video for just a second, or actually, no, I'm not. I don't know where the button went. I just want to write something down real fast. So I apologize for that short delay. We've had experiences through the Kundalini yoga immersions and even the tapping immersions that support us in connecting to our energetic bodies, right? We've had experiences, I've kind of spoken to this briefly in that earth piece that support us in connecting to innate living animate wisdom that lives within our meditative subconscious mind, right? So again, when we can see these laws of natural law and the Kabbalion, we can begin to even see what we experience when we do those tapping exercises in such a different way. Because ultimately, all of these experiences are going to let us connect to the living vitality and innate animate existence, excuse me, that lives and moves in absolutely everything, ourselves included. Again, the symptoms let us see the cellular expression, and that cellular expression lets us remember our aliveness. And if one were to really remember that, your truest aliveness, how would you be invited to start living each day in honor of that? How would your day look entirely and experience, the experience of that day be entirely different than what it is now? And I love this part because even if there are pieces you don't know yet, remember this. I've spoken about this doctor many times in the Telegram group. I love her. I will have to say credit where credit is due. Um, I first started hearing all of this from Cassie Huckabee about 4 years ago. Healing doesn't start when it is something that's always happening, because if it wasn't, you wouldn't be alive right now. If your body was not always working for you, you would not be here right now. And that is beautiful. So today, we're going to cover meditation, movement, sound, EMFs, and circadian rhythm. There's going to be a lot of various links that I have in some of the slides. I will post this in those where the slides are in the Google Drive, so you can go in and click on them and do some more exploration and learning. But we're going to cover these and try to do them with as much depth as we can for our last class today. So daily meditation practices actually physically reshape the brain. Neuroplasticity is basically the ability for the brain to take in new information. If you were to go back even to some of the memory pieces that we talked about, we might have touched on this in there. I honestly can't remember. But every time we're experiencing something new, new information is being assimilated into those neural network structures. And so when we think about the brain's ability to reshape itself and adapt based on environmental inputs and experiences and all the different ways in which energy moves that we've talked about, but we're going to talk about with sound as well. We see some beautiful things happen with meditation. The amygdala shrinks. The amygdala is basically the smoke detector for the brain, and it is really associated with strong emotions. So whether that is trauma or even super intense joy, it is part of the brain that processes emotional information and dictates behavioral responses to stress. If we are in a very hyper vigilant alert state, this amygdala is going to be going off all the time. So this meditation practices, consistent daily meditation practices are going to actually allow us to shrink the amygdala, which doesn't mean that, you no longer feel the joy. It just means that there's going to be a little bit more space for executive decision making, which we see in that second piece, right? So all this happens really at the same time. Um, the prefrontal cortex is going to strengthen. This is the area, think forehead, that's responsible for executive decision making, attention, and working memory. If you go back to our conversation on memory and thoughts, the working memory and the short-term memory are in the same area. So part of this thickening of the prefrontal cortex is also going to be associated with recall and even storage of memory, because another thing we see is the hippocampus is going to strengthen and grow, and that is a big player in converting short-term memory into long-term memory. So meditation is going to help reduce levels of dementia. I can actually support reversal of age-related brain shrinkage. Like if you were to practice meditating every day, I want to say for 31 minutes, it says on the next slide, but I believe 31 minutes, you can literally reverse brain shrinkage. You can reverse I want to say gray matter, but I looked something up about gray matter the other night. So I question using that word because it means a couple different things depending on the context of how you're speaking to it. But meditation is going to increase levels of GABA, serotonin, dopamine. So again, we're going to feel more calm. We're going to feel happier. We're going to feel more pleasure in life. As I was putting this together, I was thinking about how many people come to therapy looking for this and talking through something. If, right, we need to work with the energy in the body, or we need to shift brainwave states. Talking about the thing is not necessarily going to allow us the experience to shift out of beta. Meditation is going to help us access alpha, theta, or delta wave states, depending on the meditation practice. Beta is your awake, alert, I'm moving through the day. And then it goes alpha, theta, delta. So think delta, even theta is like REM sleep. delta has REM sleep components to it, but it's like the deepest layer of sleep. Alpha is kind of that like I'm waking up, I'm really calm, I'm feeling connected with nature, but you're really going to hit that theta and delta when you go into true meditation practices. And so these resources, videos, I just want to highlight some of them real fast. That first link is going to break down those four brainwave states for you a little more, much more than what I can do in the hour that we have today with the content we have to go over. Um, I can't remember what the second video is. I apologize. I cannot remember for the life of me what it is. Um, the third one is a research on Kirtan Kriya. So that is a meditation practice in Kundalini Yoga. And that share is actually a demonstration of it, I believe. Um, 12 minutes per day is shown to boost brain connectivity, decrease inflammation, and increase telomerase. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, but it's basically an enzyme that's going to reduce cellular aging by 43%. And that NIH article is going to support that research. So take a look at those. Going on to movement. This ties into metabolic and energetic processes because truthfully, oh, and I didn't highlight this, but all meditation, right? If you look at those brainwave states and what that means on a metabolic ATP piece as well, um, meditation is going to fully support those metabolic processes as well that we've talked about. And so going into movement, our metabolic processes are going to function when movement is regular and consistent, not necessarily just a task or something to be done in an hour or 2 hours of the day. It's fascinating to look at some of these statistics because it really just highlights how sedentary we've become as a culture. As recently as 1820, almost 80% of Americans worked in physically demanding jobs concerning agriculture. The obesity rate at that time was close to zero. So think about that. Not just physically demanding jobs, but if you're working agriculture, you're also working outside. You're interfacing. We'll get to EMFs in a moment. You're interfacing with so many natural pieces that the body is designed to do. Now, just 1.3% of people work in agriculture. And truthfully, we virtually sit down or lie down all of the time. I found this research to be very interesting. If you live in a low walkability area, pre-diabetes in that area is 32% higher than an area that is walkable, and the likelihood of developing type 2 diabetes is 30 to 50% higher than a walkable area. I didn't learn, well, I learned this in creating this, but I thought this was very interesting. In major US cities, parking takes up about 1/3 of the entire city, the land of the city itself. So with that industrial revolution, right, the boom in saying like, oh, we have all these jobs, like work, da 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 da, right? We've also created lifestyles that go against the way our body has literally been taught to live. So the invitation as I say these things is not to necessarily take more fitness classes. It's really to design your life to make movement the norm and to be outside the norm. So there is research that will show excessive sitting is correlated to more inflammation, more oxidative stress, more mitochondrial dysfunction. Again, we covered all of that in week 2. This is a quote from Dr. Andrew Huberman. Even if we get our 180 minutes of zone 2 moderate cardio per week, the benefits of that are largely erased if we are sitting more than 5 hours per day. Insane. Think about even just how much driving you may potentially do in a week or sitting at a desk. I invite you to go back to week 2. Again, there are going to be things that I may not tie together, but you may be like, oh, that and that in my life, right? Like, and just pulling these threads together. Something to consider going back to week 2, right? We talked about how muscles use said ATP. Muscle contraction is medicine as it helps signal to make more ATP as the muscle uses said ATP. So what we talked about in a variety of different ways, right, were the metabolic processes that create ATP and the necessary for movement for ATP to be consistently made, and what happens when that backup happens, right? That's the paradox of the stress response cycle. I wanted to highlight this study. This came out of Good Energy from Casey Means. So I have added her book for those that did not read it during book club with us. I forget which month we did it. Maybe March. I can't remember. I apologize. Um, to go back and read it. This comes from her book. So they did research. They did 3 groups, divided participants into 3 groups. One group sat regularly for 9 hours. Another walked for 30 minutes during the day, and then, sat for the rest of the day. And then the third group had regular activity breaks. Like they walked regularly for 1 minute and 40 seconds, basically every 30 minutes. So every 30 minutes, they were able to get up, move, even if that was just, walking outside or walking into another room, walking back. The last group, excuse me, the group that walked for 1 minute and 40 seconds every 30 minutes had the lowest post-meal glucose peaks and insulin levels. And so we talked about, right, glucose and insulin and blood sugar in week 2 as well. So ideally, after we eat a meal, we want to get up and walk. We want to get up and move to signal to the body, hey, use this energy. Break this down in a way so that you can literally help the body, right, absorb those nutrients. Let the invitation of that food to fuel you to create more ATP for those bodily processes to function in the ways that they need to. I invite this water analogy. This is also in Casey Means, and I thought this was very interesting. We need about 90 ounces of water throughout the day. We wouldn't drink all of that at once, right? You wouldn't take, an hour out of your day or 30 minutes out of your day and drink 90 ounces in one sitting. Why would we do all of our moving in one sitting as well? Just something to consider. Walking 10,000 steps per day, 50% lower dementia risk, 50 to 70% lower risk of premature death, 44% lower risk of type 2 diabetes, 31% lower risk of obesity, significant reduction in cancer, major depression, gastric reflux, sleep apnea. The list goes on and on. So again, we're not trying to bust these 10,000 steps out in one time span. Can you go out for a 20-minute walk in the morning before you start your day? Can you go mid-afternoon? We're getting to a point now. I mean, it's already like 95 degrees up where I'm at, and it's 12:30. So it's a little toasty. Go for, just a little walk around the block, throw a hat on, throw, any layers on to protect yourself from the sun if you are not not in a state of using light as medicine to absorb the intensity of the afternoon sun yet. Do some in the evening, do some at night. But if you can make walking and being mobile, movement, make it more of a consistent invitation in your day to day, you're gonna notice significant shifts in energy and mood, all of the things. Again, 3 simple movement tips. Walk at least 7,000 steps per day, space them throughout the day, work yourself up to a 10,000, get your heart rate over 60% of your maximum for 150 minutes a week. That's 30 minutes 5 days per week, excuse me, and lift heavy things multiple times a week in a way that hits every major muscle group. All of those pieces are going to help support the metabolic processes of ATP. Sound. This I will probably end up doing 4 weeks on its own, because there is so much when it comes to sound and frequency, and we're just gonna kind of cover the top of it. But sound moves is frequency, okay? And if you recall from lecture 3 during light, light is actually 0.0034% of the entire electromagnetic spectrum, right? So what we see is literally 0%. What does that mean? It means 100% is unseeable, right? So sound moves as frequency, it moves as electromagnetic frequencies, and EMFs is the broad term for energy waves, ranging from high to low frequency. So EMF is kind of like the overall umbrella. ELF, which we talked about week 7 when we were talking about the Earth's electromagnetic frequency, is extremely low frequency and is a specific subset of EMF. I think it's even lower than 100 kilohertz, but that's where we're going to go with today. If you recall from that learning lab, the resonant frequency of the Earth, that Schumann resonance, 7.83. It is incredibly low, which is beautiful. It's natural. That is the Earth's natural frequency. EMFs can range in spectrum all the way to 300. I forget the term for the G. I want to say it's gigahertz. I could be wrong on that. But basically 1 GHz is 1 million kilohertz. So just think about that spectrum. The Earth is literally all the way at 0, and that spectrum can go all the way to, if you were to multiply 1 million times 300, is that 3 billion or 300 million? I'm not going to math right now for this. I didn't plan to do math in this lecture. But just something to take into consideration, right? This spectrum is gigantic, and it's going to cover radio frequency, cell phones, towers, Wi-Fi, smart meters. We're going to come back to that in just a couple of slides when we get into EMFs. But I wanted to highlight the impact of sound, because sound is going to activate all regions of the brain almost simultaneously. It's going to promote improved mood, stress reduction, increased cognitive function. If we were to look at ancestral and indigenous tribes, we're going to see ceremonial drumming. We're going to see chanting. We even see chanting with Kundalini yoga and other yoga practices, right? Natural musical instruments like rattles and flutes, that all of this as sound is going to support healing and accessing alternative states of consciousness. This YouTube video, I do want to watch it. So I'm going to either pause the video or stop sharing. We're going to see what happens first, but give me just a moment. Okay, so the recording is still happening. Let me pause for just a minute while I pull this up. Okay, we're back. I have it pulled up. Excuse my taps.
This is fibrin, which indicates.
I should give some context to this. So what we're looking at is a live blood analysis that's done before a 20-minute gong sound bath, and then we're going to see that blood analysis after.
Liver stress.
And that's the cobwebs.
And this is the cobwebs, yes. Yeah. You do have a bit of bacteria floating around here, the white dots. So I don't know whether you've been sick.
Yeah, it's quite pointy, isn't it?
Very. So it'll be very interesting to see what it does to your gut.
And dehydration of these particles. Shadows.
Yeah.
So we're about to do a 20-minute sound bar for the live blood analysis. So relax, everybody, and so this is after the gong bath, 20-minute gong bath. We're just taking another blood analysis of Amber's finger. Taking some blood. Right.
Look.
So can you just explain what's going on?
Yeah, well, the cells are all separated, and they're really round. Virtually 100% of amber cells before were dehydrated. Now we can see one here, one here, one here. So that's a really big change.
So that's a significant percentage that's being affected.
Let's just go to the other level. And they're all separate.
So what does it indicate when the cells separate?
Less inflammation.
Yep.
Less acidity. So everyone's had a great result showing massive to moderate improvements in their blood after 20 minutes gong. Staying in the gongs, obviously, is what we need to do.
Yes, definitely more gongs.
More gongs.
Amazing, literally just amazing. A friend sent this to me a couple weeks ago after my boyfriend did a gong bath for a community event, and I didn't open it up until this week, and my mind is still just blown away. If that doesn't visually show you the impact of sound, I mean, I don't know what else does. It's phenomenal. It is absolutely phenomenal. So I want to go into some of those pieces for a moment. We're going to go back to screen share. I'm going to hit play. This is where I wanted to come next. That's correct. Electromagnetic frequencies. So the reason I wanted to also show that video before going into EMFs, again, this first line I had 2 slides ago, but the reason for that is because high intensity of chronic exposure to EMF is linked to cellular dehydration. So if you go, like if you were to pause this and go back to the video and look at her blood before that gong bath, right? Just the inflammation, how stuck everything was, right? And then they say after the gong, right? Oh, her cells literally are hydrated. Consider an invitation to going back to week 7 and the nadis, those little river channels, right? If we are exposed to if we are chronically exposed to EMF, which most of the time we are in our day-to-day, we're going to have blood chemistry that potentially looks like that. And those little river channels are going to become clogged. So what does that mean then for glandular system? How does that impact organ and other tissues? What does that mean for mental health symptoms, right? Again, the brain weighs 2 to 3% of the body's energy, requires 20 to 30% of the body's available energy. If our blood, literally the cells in our blood are not hydrated, and our blood, the water, right? Even going back to, I think we talked about that in week 2, that blood itself is 90% water. It's just amazing to me to start putting all these pieces together. And again, I share this information not to, make you afraid or say go live in a hole or anything like that. It is simply to provide a level of awareness and a conversation that we don't have in our day-to-day. And if we had these conversations, how would truly not even just our day look, but the ripple impact of our culture and society and our earth look? We're going to see areas of high EMF. And I put that 1 GHz to the million there because the most common frequencies that we see with Wi-Fi are 2.4, 5, and 6. So that's 2.4 million, 5 million, and 6 million kilohertz, which is significantly higher than the frequency of the earth. So areas of high EMF. We have airports, wherever there's high Wi-Fi usage, your vehicles, right? I'm actually in the process. My lease expires at the end of the month, and I'm joking, but not joking, that I want to get a horse or a really old, like 1980, 1990, that doesn't have the Wi-Fi stuff built in, because think about sitting in traffic, right? Think about my first panic attack. I was literally in traffic. I question now how much of that was due to the amount that I drove, the amount of time I spent indoors because I worked in a jail, right? Think about even just the LED smart lights, 2.4 GHz, significantly higher than the natural frequency of the earth. That when we are in nature, when people go camping and they're like, I feel so much better, and then they go back to the city, right? EMF plays such a big role in it. That's also why when, cell phone towers, everyone went to 5G, people became upset. You saw protests, you saw cities say, no, absolutely not. We don't want those towers here, because of what that frequency means and meant to the area. We're around them constantly. So some things that you can do to decrease exposure: turn off the Wi-Fi in the evening or when you don't have it in use. Um, I'm not going to say my boyfriend hates it, but I chuckle because, and he chuckles, I will unplug the Wi-Fi every single night. I don't want to bathe in that while I go to sleep. I do not sleep with my phone in the room with me. I turn it off. If I need an alarm, put it on airplane mode, and I will set the alarm, and it will be, in a different room on the other side of the house. If you need an alarm, switch to a regular alarm. Do not sleep with your phone by your head, though. Do not ultimately sleep in bed with your phone. Um, and there are EMF blocking bags. Faraday bag is a great company. There's EMF blocking clothing. I listed some there. Um, I see this a lot even now with traveling. People are wearing certain items, or putting their electronics and certain things to, obviously we're not going to shift everything, but every choice that you can make is going to play a role. Closing out, we're gonna speak about circadian rhythm. Again, all these last five I could spend so much time touching on. So again, brief cover here. The circadian rhythm is going to be the body's internal 24-hour biological clock. It's going to regulate our sleep-wake cycle, hormone release, digestion, body temperature. We talked about this with light, right? That the natural light for the body is the sun. So when we talked about in that learning lab about light, making sure that you're going out within the first hour of waking up so that the body can literally take in the light. It can literally take in the message that it is time to stop doing nighttime processes, and it is time to start doing daytime processes, and it is time to set a alarm in the body for 16 hours later, basically, when those nighttime processes to make melatonin, all those things can start to happen. If you go back to that lecture on light, you'll even see how hormone release is involved. We'll talk about digestion briefly here. We talked about the rules of digestion in weeks 5 and 6, but something to consider because digestion is a daytime activity. We'll talk about eating at a certain point. We want to be conscious of when we eat, because it does play a role in metabolic processes and ATP as well. So tips for protecting your circadian rhythm. Again, a lot of this is going to come from Good Energy by Casey Means. Just start by getting, excuse me, an understanding of your sleep pattern. You can wear a sleep tracker for a couple days just to get a baseline assessment of sleep quantity, quality, and consistency. I love her book because even in the back, she's got a checklist all about sleep, right? Do you know this? Do you know this? Do you know this? And it's not from a knowledge loss standpoint, but it's an invitation to begin to understand your sleep pattern so you can protect your sleep-wake cycles. So in understanding your sleep patterns, right, and getting this baseline, an invitation to assess your average sleep during the week. Is it less than 7 hours? Do you have days that you tend to get more or less sleep? I know for me, when I'm up here in the mountain, I definitely get more consistent sleep than when I'm down at the bus, and that is simply because my partner wakes up significantly couple hours earlier than I do. So even just being aware of those outliers, right, is going to let you create a plan of action for yourself. What is your quality of sleep? Are you getting adequate REM sleep? Again, going into that theta and delta brainwave states. If you go back a couple slides, that link is there for you to dig deeper on. And what factors such as alcohol, marijuana, eating late, nighttime blue light exposure, etc., may be negatively impacting your sleep. Right. Again, we talked about blue light after the sun goes down. We've talked about we'll talk about food here in a minute. Another recommendation is to log your food temporarily to understand what you eat and when you eat. Something that she shared in her book was realizing that she would go for a little snack at like 11 o'clock every night because of how her residency times were set up. And that was part of what she shifted, right? She chose to eat at different times because that was going to impact her overall energy, mood, all the various things that we've learned run downhill of the metabolic processes. So you can pick a cutoff time for last call on daily eating. Again, digestion is a daytime process, and if occurring at night or during sleep, can impact not just the sleep-wake cycle, but the processes that the body has to give energy to at night, right? So at night we have, and we talked about this in the light class as well, when you are in darkness, there's a whole slew of metabolic processes that are happening where the body is detoxing and purifying and doing everything that it needs to basically like clean up from the day. If we're doing a daytime process while those processes are happening, not all of the available energy for those processes that need to occur are being given to it. Another recommendation, work to minimize bright artificial light after dark. So something you can do instead of LED lights, switch to red bulb. Real red bulb, not a LED bulb that is wrapped in red, but a real red light. Red light is going to promote relaxation, sleep, restoration of muscle tissues, things of that nature. Blue light blocking glasses after dark if you have to be on any type of screen. Even aim to stop looking at screens, even backlit e-readers an hour before bed. Create a light-free, sound-free bedroom because any amount of light has the ability to inform the body, right? Oh, it's daytime, meaning we take in an incongruency of light. The eyes will sense, oh, I see light, but the skin will sense it is dark, right? And we've learned through the first couple weeks what that incongruency does. Other recommendations, get outside in that first hour of the day. We've talked about this before. Your body needs to know when it is day and night to function properly, and you literally have to show your brain sunlight. I would also recommend showing your brain the sunset, right? Show your brain the nighttime. Windows are not going to be sufficient if you're sitting inside simply because the way the glass is made is going to filter out the UVA and the UVB, that signal, right? Like the photons, excuse me, in the eyes that need to pick up the light. The glass actually blocks that out. So something to consider depending on where you live and you know, time of year and things like that. Invest in outside gear that's going to let you be accountable to going outside at all times of the year. Even if it's cloudy, that sun is still out. It just means there are clouds between you and the sun, right? You can still pick up the frequency and the waves of the sun. What we see is 0%, right? Just because we don't see it doesn't mean we're not getting something from it. And spend significantly more time outside than inside. We talked about this even with the movement piece. Aiding to get outdoors as frequently as possible by taking moments to pop out. Things that you would do regularly, right? Eating meals, reading, phone calls, catching up with your partner, playing with your kids, do all that outside. The more time we can be outside with the frequency of the earth, the more support we're going to have in ATP, metabolic processes. The more your circadian rhythm is going to be protected, which is also going to support metabolic processes as well. And so all of these pieces just beautifully go hand in hand. I'm just looking over at my left because that's where my clock is. And that is it, guys. That that is what we have for today. So like I said, I know we covered those last pieces very quickly. I wanted to give a few more inputs before we closed our series, just so you guys had invitations to, continue exploring things outside of here. Please feel free, as always, to reach out with any questions, and allow yourself to get curious, whether they are things that I say and you've tied things together that I haven't touched on. Allow your curiosity and your intuition to guide you in making decisions for yourself and learning about these things, because the most natural way we can live, how do I want to say this? True medicine is free to all of us. We just have to learn how to use it. And that's where I'm going to close today. If you guys have any questions, please let me know.